wherever you are in the different countries, in the different continents, in the different time zones. We extend a very warm welcome to all our distinguished guests from world over. Hope you're fine, you're taking care of your health, you're taking care of your wellness, and you're taking care of your family, your neighbors, your community, your society, and everybody whosoever is with you. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a great pleasure this afternoon. We have got Mr. Anil MANOCHA, who is the head of this entire program series, which is on water-related issues, water-related management strategies, and he's the senior advisor to our chamber on water-related management activities. We extend him a very warm welcome to join us from Singapore. He is the executive director of Ion Exchange Asia Pacific Private Limited. We have also been joined this evening, our special guest, Dr. Laura Richards. She is the research fellow, Department of Earth and Environment, the University of Manchester, United Kingdom. We extend her a very warm welcome, and it's a pleasure. And today we are going to discuss about groundwater contaminations. So today on the Friday, that's 27th of November 2020, time zone is your own, wherever you are, and we are going to roll the series. And this is a part of our Making Education Relevant, and this is 376th webinar during this pandemic. And those of us, those are watching, because it is live on the YouTube, no Zoom link, no Zoom login, nothing. You just come on the GS Motivator, and right from there, you can watch this program live for all of us world over. So kindly pass on to your friends, your neighbors, others, to whomsoever you want to be shared. So International Chamber for Service Industry, ICSI, extends a very warm welcome to all of you. Since 1994, we are taking care of, and today the family is about 30 million non-resident Indians world over. During the entire week, we have got 25 plus webinars, almost on the average 3 webinars every day. And we are talking about how to make education relevant. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, teachers and youth empowerment. Then Friday, we have got water management strategies. Then Saturday, we have got Swami Vivekanand from Chicago. Sunday, we talk about micro, small, and the medium enterprise, startups, self-employment, entrepreneurship. Saturday evening, we also talk about your health and wellness. Then Sunday morning, we have got a program live from Los Angeles, Woodbury University. Sunday evening, we take you to ASEAN. And Sunday's last program is with the non-resident Indians from world over. What exactly to be done for the new education policy 2020, which has been announced? Because at present, 1.86 billion children are away from their schools, colleges, universities, and their polytechnic skill centers, competency centers. Our chamber world over, approximately 150 plus countries, where we have gathered the data and the stats, and we have put into the perspective we talk over here is that the world is going to be into the new order now. The whole order of the world is going to change. B2B, no more business to business. It is back to basics of life. Sustainable development. Your basic food, your organic food, that has to be given the first priority. Along with that, your health and wellness. And third is education got to get on to earn and learn. And that is the way we proceed. Our chamber at present is helping all the education establishments for setting up incubation centers, finishing school for soft skills and life skills, and adult tinkering labs for the youngsters. So ladies and gentlemen, whatsoever human mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. Let's come together. Let's make education relevant. It's a global confluence of motivators, technocrats, counselors, wellness experts, corporate, government administrators, decision makers from entire world. This evening, it's a proud privilege through the good offices of Mr. Anil MANOCHA, the head of our, water management strategies sector department. We have got Dr. Laura Richard. Research Fellow, Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences, University of Manchester, United Kingdom. Dr. Laura has expertise in the groundwater quality and remediations, especially related to geogenic trace contaminants, particularly arsenic in groundwater. Dr. Richard is currently involved as a researcher and a co-investigator in the Indo-UK water quality project, WOW, Far Ganga. Her research on depleting groundwater resources, both in terms of quality and quantity in the Ganga basin, and that is brings various remedial and possible options. Her research builds upon her background in environmental engineering and geochemistry and is informed by international field programs in Southeast Asia, India, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Vietnam, South America, that's Chile and Bolivia, and Sub-Saharan Africa, Zambia, and Rwanda. Dr. Richard has co-authored 25, 18 as the first author, scientific publications, and on International Water Association book chapters with more than 800 citations, and delivered more than 50 presentation seminars at international meetings, conferences in 2007. Dr. Richards has also co-organized workshops and seminars, capacity building series in Myanmar, and has contributed to public seminars and outreach events in Chile and UK. So, ladies and gentlemen, this evening she's brought to us by our senior advisor, Mr. Anil MANOCHA. MANOCHA ji is based out of Singapore and is experienced professional in water and water waste, that is waste management. He has about 35 years of professional experience working in India, ASEAN, Middle East, Africa, and other parts of the world. He actively collaborates with stakeholders, technology partners, governments, financial institutions in offering practical solutions for water treatment, water conservation, wastewater treatment, zero liquid discharge. Anil ji holds degree in mechanical engineering and is associated with various chambers, Singapore Water Association, India Business Forum, trade organizations. With these words, ladies and gentlemen, join me in extending a very warm welcome to Mr. Anil MANOCHA and Dr. Laura Richards. I hand you over with a very safe hands, and we go ahead with Mr. Anil MANOCHA to take on the floor and to start today's session and proceedings. Hearty welcome to both of you. Pleasure to have.
Thank you, Gulshan ji, and good day, everyone. We are going to talk about today's our 7th webinar since we started this series from 23rd of October, and we will be talking today on groundwater contamination. A very quick look on whatever we have done so far is captured in the slides, and what we are going to do is we are going to discuss in the following manner. First, we are going to devote some time on queries which were raised during last webinar. We had a lot of questions related to what we presented and what was broadcasted to various participants. So we'll spend a minute on that. Then we will also be covering about key takeaways since October 23rd when we started the series and what type of chapters we have covered. And we will be also covering, bringing the aspect that what managing water is more important than water resource. And if we can manage the water well, we can overcome a lot of problems. We will address current issues and we will also address the initiatives taken by India so far. We will be spending some time on water education, what type of career opportunities it brings to young professionals. And then we'll hand over the final session to Laura. She will be talking about groundwater contamination. So in the last webinar, we had certain queries as we were talking about Singapore Water Week, which was concluded last week. So this is the link which has been given for the people who would like to see and visit the Singapore Water Week website. as of now, there is no access available on virtual platform to participants who are not pre-registered, but it is available to the people who are pre-registered. So most of the people will be disappointed because they will not be able to access the presentations made in the last Singapore Water Week. But at the same time, there's information available that you can link yourself to the upcoming real Singapore Water Week, which is going to take place from June 20 to June 24. So most of the people who are interested can just log in into that. And there was also a query on startups, and also we are giving a link here how you can conceive a water startup, what type of grants and facilities are available. So this is a particular link for the people who want to get into water related startups. And through ICSI, we are also generating a document which is going to address the skill gaps, need for having offline and online skill centers, a note on disruptive technologies which will make the recycling systems competitive. We'll also be talking about business incubation centers and all those things. So this note is being submitted to Government of India through Gulshan ji, and we are working on that. And we'll be also talking about upcoming webinars which are likely to come post today's session. So far, we have addressed in the last seminars. First seminar was devoted to water issues. In water issues, we covered on surface water, and in surface water, we covered the water pollution on the left hand side. First picture, if you see, this talks about the pollution in river water. This particular session was held by Dr. Zaki from Malaysia, and we talked about what sort of industrial pollution and how the industry or other people pollutes the environment and what sort of methods are there. The second session was devoted to how we can clean the water bodies. A natural way of cleaning water body through economics of ecology were discussed. And after this, there was a session which talks about technologies which goes into cleaning the rivers and all those things. And thereafter, we spent a seminar on business opportunity in water transportation sector, how the rivers and all can be used for bringing economy to the country. After talking about the supply side of water, as far as surface water is concerned, we moved on to agriculture sector. In agriculture sector, we talked about the need of water conservation. We talked about the possibility of conserving more than 50% of water through the latest technologies. We talked about crops and so many things. Then immediately after this, we spent some time on technologies which can be incorporated for developing multi-food processing systems. So we talked about off-grid solutions, US-based technology, and the key learning in the last webinars were related to this, that water is life, but at the same time it's a carrier of pollution, and it carries all type of chemical waste, and we need to handle it very clearly. Chemical waste, over exploitation, natural resources, excessive fertilizers. We also talked about the fact that water can be recycled 5 times before it is drained. So if we are able to recycle the water efficiently, probably we can bridge the gap between supply and demand. And we also talked about the issue that 80% of water, fresh water which is available, is used for agriculture sector. And by the proper techniques, efficient techniques, we can reduce this water consumption, and this water can be made available for home use and industry use. And then also we talked about integrating the technologies for food processing, crop processing, etc., which can boost the agriculture economy. Then we had a chapter, we had talk on Cape Town water crisis, and we had a presentation on Cape Town by Fred, and he brought a aspect very clearly that unless and until we communicate with the end user, we will not be able to achieve the objective what we have. So he talked about the water policy issues, how they overcome the problems of Cape Town, and what's the current situation. And then last Friday, we talked about circular economy, and the key learning was that we need to map the actual value of water. We talked about water grids, we talked about destructive policies, technologies which are upcoming, and we talked about the triple bottom line and all those aspects. So we have gone up to so far in water system, but now if we see the various news we are in circulation, that news says that there's a water stress. A lot of people will be living under water scarred area, 9 billion people in the world requires water, and there will be agriculture demand, water demand in India will increase, and we have complex issues of water scarcity, climate change, governance and transboundary issues. Water will become a very scarce community. All those things have been talked. We also talked what India is doing, and in India, what came out very clearly was that more than almost 25% of the 2 billion people who have got access to drinking water are from India since 1990. And then there's the concept of act local, think global, where a lot of improvements have been taken place in India in various parts of the world. There's a famous water story of Latur where the water trains were sent, and today that district has become self-sufficient in water. Then we talked about other success stories in India. Now this is a chapter on education. We says that India will be needing so much of money every year will be spent on water, and there will be a huge demand of water professionals. How the technology is emerging, that there will be cross integration of water technologies with digital, artificial intelligence, robotic technologies. A lot of emergence of distributed technologies coming, which will make water recyclable as a viable economic option. We also talked about various careers, right from the plant operator to a technician to a lab to engineer to people who can talk about total water management, people who can design the systems, and people who can handle the disputes. And we talked about certain type of courses which can be introduced of various duration, 24 weeks, 30, 20 weeks like that, which will be designed for various people. So this is all we have spoken and talked. And then we mapped the opportunities in India for the next 10 years. And what you could see in the yellow is the opportunities coming up in the agriculture sector. What you can see in the blue is the opportunities coming up in water supply sector. And the total map of opportunities lies something close to $6 billion to be spent in next 10 years time. So this is what we have talked so far. And today we are lucky to have Dr. Laura with us. She will be talking about groundwater contamination. In order to set the discussion further, as we all must know that water has a lot of water-related diseases are there, which is led to contamination. Chromium is a heavy metal which is known for a lung cancer. Lead accumulates and reduces the functionality of kids. Kidney, cadmium is again very toxic to humans. Arsenic causes cancer, kidney, and malfunctioning. Iron, copper, zinc. These are all well-known metallic impurities which goes into water and it contaminates, and then it suffers a human life. So with this, I will request Laura to give her talk, and we'll be looking forward to listening to you, Laura. Over to you, please.
Okay. Hello, and firstly, I'd like to thank the organizers very, very much for their invitation to join the seminar series. It's really great to be here, so thank you. Today, I'd like to provide an overview of some of our groundwater quality
Dr.
research
Laura,
activities.
Dr.
Yes.
Laura, we got to increase your volume a bit. You've got to increase your volume a bit if it's possible. That would be very kind of you. Very kind of you.
Let me try to adjust that.
Yes, that would be very kind. Yes.
Are you able to hear that any better now?
Yes, better than before. Better than before. The output level of the speaker. Okay, fine. Great.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
I will start over then. Thank you.
Please.
Okay. So just to start over again, because I realized my volume was maybe too quiet, I would like to firstly thank the organizers very, very much for their invitation to join the seminar series. It's great to be here, so thank you very much. So today, I'd like to provide an overview of some of our groundwater quality research activities, which are ongoing in the state of Bihar, India, in the Middle Gangetic Basin. We have been working in Bihar over the last several years as part of an Indo-UK water quality project called Farganga. This project is supported by the UK's Natural Environment Research Council as well as India's Department of Science and Technology. This project represents a consortium of 8 institutions. In the UK, this is the University of Manchester, where I'm from, the University of Birmingham, Salford University, and the British Geological Survey. In India, the core partners are the National Institute of Hydrology, Mahavir Cancer Sansthan in Patna, IIT Kharagpur, and IIT Roorkee. The overall aim of the Farganga project is to understand the interactions and fate of groundwater contaminants, especially naturally occurring arsenic, for improved health and economic development. Today in this webinar, I will start with a brief introduction to groundwater quality with a focus on its important challenges and key questions that drive some of our research activities. I'll then provide a brief overview of some of our selected projects in Bihar, India, firstly looking at geogenic, or in other words, naturally occurring inorganic contaminants such as arsenic and uranium. Secondly, we will discuss a recent study that we led in Patna on emerging organic contaminants such as antibiotics, pharmaceuticals, or chemicals used in agriculture. And finally, we will briefly discuss some of our ongoing work on developing improved remediation frameworks. A major motivator for my research is that 3 in 10 people globally still lack access to safely managed drinking water services. Water quality, including the presence of dangerous trace contaminants such as arsenic, is central to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. However, there's major challenges which remain in meeting these targets, and to date, no country is on target to achieve all of them. Groundwater resources are particularly important, especially given the increased reliance on groundwater resources due to a changing climate. And in places like India, groundwater is an extremely important resource, providing drinking supplies for millions of people. Groundwater pollutants can derive from a range of natural and anthropogenic causes and can include inorganic, organic, and microbial pollutants. Assessing groundwater vulnerability is thus very important for water security as well as for public health protection. One major water quality challenge in many parts of the world is arsenic, which is an inorganic pollutant and is usually naturally occurring. Elevated concentrations of arsenic in groundwater supplies used for drinking impact the health of millions of people in South and Southeast Asia and elsewhere across the globe. And because of the scale of these impacts, groundwater arsenic pollution has been described as the largest poisoning of a population in history. The maps on this slide here show indicative probability maps of arsenic contamination in groundwater. The maps on the right show models developed specifically for India across the whole of India. This India-wide arsenic probability map has just very recently been published in an open access article by Joel Podgorski and co-authors in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. In groundwater in South and Southeast Asia, aquifers are typically relatively shallow and in reducing geochemical conditions. There's common processes which occur in these aquifers which contribute to the mobilization of arsenic into groundwater from the surrounding sediments. When naturally occurring arsenic in sediments is bound, it's relatively low risk to people. However, when there's sources of bioavailable organic carbon and metal-reducing bacteria, then arsenic can be mobilized via the reductive dissolution of arsenic-bearing iron and manganese sediments. Once arsenic has been released into groundwater, it can potentially pose a major risk to people who can be exposed via drinking, cooking, or even agriculture in some cases. Chronic exposure to arsenic concentrations which exceed the World Health Organization provisional guideline of 10 micrograms per liter, or even perhaps lower concentrations, as some recent studies suggest, can lead to a number of detrimental impacts to human health. Our research group is very interested in understanding how and why groundwater contamination occurs and ultimately what we can do about it. Some of the research questions we ask include those around groundwater vulnerability and around the mechanistic understanding of what controls how pollutants are released into groundwater and what happens to them once they are released. We're also interested in learning how groundwater pumping might impact water quality. Finally, we're interested in developing decision support systems and guidance regarding how to best select remediation or mitigation strategies to best protect public health. So with that background, I would like to showcase some examples of our recent research in Bihar, India, which has been undertaken in close collaboration with colleagues from Mahavir Cancer Sansthan in Patna. The first example I would like to provide is a study that we published earlier this year related to the distribution and geochemical controls on arsenic and uranium in groundwater, derived drinking water sources in Bihar. This is an open access publication, which means that it's freely available for anyone to access the full text of the article. The link here is shown. So as we've just reviewed, it's well known that chronic exposure to groundwater containing elevated concentrations of geogenic contaminants like arsenic and uranium can lead to detrimental health impacts. Because of this, we were interested in developing a study in Bihar to comprehensively and systematically characterize inorganic geochemistry in groundwater, with the specific objectives being to understand how groundwater contaminants are spatially distributed through the state and what dominant processes are likely to impact this. So we ran a field campaign last year where we drove across every single district in Bihar, covering thousands of kilometers and collecting around 300 groundwater samples. We collected samples from private and government wells from different depths and pre-selected random locations. This was done during the pre-monsoon season. In the field, we took some measurements directly at the time of sampling, like pH, EH, electrical conductivity, and temperature. A number of other parameters were measured back in the lab at the University of Manchester. I will provide a brief summary of some of our findings. Looking at the major composition of groundwater, we found that cations were generally dominated by sodium, calcium, and magnesium. Anions were dominated by bicarbonate and chloride. The groundwater type was calcium bicarbonate, which is very typical of shallow groundwaters in South and Southeast Asia, or sodium bicarbonate, which suggests some ion exchange reactions have occurred with the surrounding sediments. Trace elements were detected in many samples, including fluoride, iron, manganese, phosphorus, zinc, arsenic, uranium, copper, and lead. The samples were mostly around pH 7, which is normal for water. So we're interested in understanding the dominant groundwater chemistry because it helps us understand the conditions and controls on trace contaminant mobility. Further, groundwater chemistry is important for selecting appropriate remediation strategies. For example, the presence of iron or phosphate, amongst other constituents, can significantly impact the performance of filtration systems that are designed for arsenic removal. We compared measured concentrations to guideline values from the World Health Organization to see if any parameters exceeded these WHO-based limits. In some cases, groundwater contained concentrations of contaminants that did exceed the World Health Organizational guideline or World Health Organization guideline or provisional guideline values. For example, around 16% of the water samples that we sampled contained arsenic exceeding the value of 10 micrograms per liter. Manganese, nitrate, and uranium also exceeded guideline values in some cases, for example, around 15%, 8%, and 7% respectively of the samples measured. For this particular dataset, measured concentrations of fluoride, barium, lead, and copper never exceeded the guideline values. It is very important for us to consider quality assurance and quality control in our work. We were interested in understanding how represented our sampling was and in comparing to other studies that have been undertaken in Bihar. By targeting random sampling points, we are able to understand the wider distribution of groundwater composition across Bihar whilst reducing sampling bias. Some parts of Bihar are known as hotspot locations for arsenic, so we also compared our results to concentrations that were from these known hotspot locations. Our random sampling in this survey always found lower concentrations than were found in the arsenic hotspot zone. This has two important implications. Firstly, that random sampling potentially could miss localized influences, which are important to consider. But secondly, in contrast, if only hotspot areas are studied, this could potentially lead to a significant overestimation of overall concentrations across a wider area. So such considerations are very important in sampling design, as well as interpreting and comparing results from various field surveys. These maps show the distribution of arsenic and uranium in Bihar groundwater. The dots represent concentration, so a larger dot indicates a higher measured concentration. We found that arsenic concentrations were typically highest near and to the north of the Ganga River, especially between the Gandak and Koshi tributaries. Most previous studies have not covered these areas in detail. In contrast, the distribution of uranium was different than that of arsenic. Uranium was mostly elevated in a northwest to southeast band along and to the east of the Gandak River. As you can see, the distribution of arsenic and uranium is highly heterogeneous across Bihar, and there's likely both geological and redox controls on the mobility of these contaminants in groundwater, which explains this distribution. Groundwater, arsenic, and uranium were inversely correlated. So this means that areas with higher concentrations of arsenic typically had lower concentrations of uranium and vice versa. Based on the median values of measured concentrations divided by district in Bihar, typically the districts north of the Ganga trended towards higher arsenic and lower uranium, whereas districts south of the Ganga trended towards lower arsenic and higher uranium. The mobility of arsenic and uranium is strongly controlled by redox conditions, which explains this inverse relationship observed. So in general, arsenic is mobilized under more reducing conditions and uranium under oxidizing conditions. The full article provides much more detail on this. We also looked at the relationship between depth and groundwater quality. In India, as well as in many other places, the depths of private or government wells can vary substantially. In some cases, wells used for drinking were as shallow as around 5 or 6 meters, which is the most shallow groundwater resources, and deeper wells were up to around 180 or 200 meters, tapping deeper aquifers, which are generally considered to be safer. Concentrations of arsenic were found to be broadly dependent on depth. The highest arsenic concentrations typically occurred in shallow wells less than around 40 meters in depth, whilst noting that elevated arsenic can still occur at in deeper wells. Similar trends are also seen for iron and manganese. As arsenic is positively correlated with iron and manganese and inversely correlated with EH and sulfate, the trends are consistent with arsenic release by the dissolution of iron and manganese hydroxide sediments, which is the process that was shown in the introduction for this webinar. So to summarize this first part, we have characterized the major and trace geochemistry in groundwater across all districts of Bihar, especially with a focus on arsenic and uranium. Concentrations of arsenic and uranium exceeded guideline values in around 16% and 7% of the samples respectively. Arsenic and uranium are strongly inversely correlated and their distribution is highly heterogeneous. This work has important implications on identifying remediation priorities in the future and selecting appropriate remediation strategies and potentially in informing future monitoring efforts. In the second part, we would like to cover a different type of potential groundwater contamination, this time from emerging organic contaminants. Emerging organic contaminants can cover a very broad spectrum of compounds, including human and veterinary pharmaceuticals, antibiotics, chemicals used in agriculture, industrial chemicals, and chemicals like sweeteners which are used in food and beverages. Emerging organic contaminants, unlike many inorganic contaminants, are usually related to human activities. We have recently published another paper on emerging organic contaminants, or EOCs, in groundwater in Patna. We've used Patna as an example of a rapidly developing city in northern India. Again, this study has been published open access in the Journal of Environmental Pollution, and anyone can freely access the full text of this article. So pollution from EOCs and water is of great interest in India and elsewhere due to concerns regarding the development of antimicrobial resistance, ecotoxicity, and more widely as related to drinking water supply vulnerability. Because of this importance, we were very interested to characterize the types and spatial distribution of EOCs and groundwater in Patna as an example of a rapidly developing city in northern India, which may be similar to other rapidly developing areas in India and elsewhere. So the objectives of this work were to quantify and characterize groundwater EOCs in Patna and to understand how they are distributed. So last year, we also ran a detailed sampling campaign focused primarily in Patna district, Bihar, as well as a complementary smaller campaign in Balia district in UP. We collected water samples before the monsoon season in June and July, as well as after the monsoon in November and December. We collected around 50 samples for EOC analysis. The EOC analysis was run at the UK Environment Agency laboratories in Starcross, England. They use a method which uses an ultra high performance mass spectrometry technique that screens for the presence of more than 750 compounds. So this technique allows for the detection of compounds at very, very low concentrations down to the nanogram per liter level. We found a wide range of VOCs in groundwater from Patna and Balia districts. We found a total of 73 compounds at low concentrations on the order of nanogram per liter to microgram per liter levels. Within a single sample, the maximum number of compounds detected was 24. These compounds are related to a very wide range of uses, including medical and veterinary usages, agrochemicals used in agriculture, industrial and lifestyle compounds. Artificial sweeteners, which are classified as lifestyle compounds, were the EOCs that we detected by far at the highest concentrations in Patna. A number of the compounds that we detected were flagged for priority monitoring, and again, much more detail is provided in the open access paper if this is of interest. Some EOCs have guideline or advisory values which are based on potential health impacts or environmental impacts such as antimicrobial resistance or ecotoxicity. It is worth noting, however, that many EOCs do not currently have any guideline or advisory values. So although we did detect a high number of compounds, the concentrations found for most compounds are well below the guideline or advisory values for most samples. So that's an encouraging result. There are only a couple of exceptions to this. In 2 samples, a pharmaceutical carbamazepine exceeded a predicted no effect concentration level. That's these ones over here. And in another location, the industrial chemicals PFAS exceeded health advisory levels in 1 sample. So although the purpose of this study was not to provide a formal or comprehensive risk assessment, it is still encouraging that most compounds are well below the guideline or advisory levels. The concentration and composition of VOCs varied widely across the study area in Patna. In general, the highest concentrations were located relatively near the urban center and close to the river Ganga. And in contrast, rural areas typically were more dominated by agrochemicals and lower concentrations of VOCs. In most cases, the areas where the highest concentrations were detected were the same places that had the highest number of EOCs detected. We also looked at the relationship between depth and EOCs, and we found that EOCs were detected in all depths of wells sampled, so even in depths greater than 100 meters. Generally, however, higher concentrations were found at more shallow depths. Sucralose is one EOC. This is an artificial sweetener, and it's been used in many studies as a wastewater tracer. So this typically had highest concentrations at very shallow depths as well. In some cases, there's clearly localized influences, and this could be either due to geological differences or poorly constructed wells, which allow ingress from the surface to get into deeper aquifers. So the important implication of this study is that groundwater in rapidly developing cities like Patna can be vulnerable to surface-derived organic contamination, and this can be seen from the EOCs that we observed here in this study. Okay, so for this last little mini section, I'd like to move on to remediation strategies, as ultimately we're really interested in what can be done to improve drinking water quality in Bihar as well as elsewhere. This is an ongoing area of work for us, so I will just provide an overview briefly. Any time that there is a contaminated groundwater and a safer drinking water source is desired, there's a number of different approaches which can be taken. This can include point source remediation strategies, as well as wider water management considerations related to water usage, for example. And importantly, consideration of alternative water supplies can also be a remediation strategy. In the context of arsenic, there are a number of approaches which have been applied in different settings to reduce arsenic to lower concentrations. By far, the most straightforward approach is simply switching to a different source. For example, switching instead to lower arsenic groundwater or treated surface water. However, this option may not always be available. There's also a number of technical approaches, including precipitation, adsorption, ion exchange, membrane filtration, such as reverse osmosis, oxidation, and bioremediation. I'm not going to go through all the details here, but I can refer you to further references on each of these technologies. So we're really interested in looking at this in the Bihar context, where many of the commonly observed remediation approaches include household reverse osmosis systems, like the photo shown on the left, or community-scale filtration units, especially in areas which are not already covered by supplied sources. There's a huge variability in what sort of systems and technologies are used in these areas. So despite the prevalence of a number of different remediation approaches which have been applied, there are also a number of apparent remediation barriers which exist. In some cases, this can relate to the technical performance of a system. However, there are also issues in some cases around access, maintenance, convenience, socioeconomic conditions, awareness, ownership, regulation, and monitoring. We've also observed similar barriers to effective remediation in other areas that we're working, including in other parts of South and Southeast Asia, such as in Cambodia, Myanmar, and Vietnam, and in South America. So although the concepts are quite universal, the local context is really important for understanding what might work well and what barriers there might be in a particular location. So especially given the implementation barriers that are observed, it's essential that technical aspects are considered alongside environmental, socioeconomic, and regulatory aspects when considering the selection and management of remediation approaches. There does not appear to be a one-size-fits-all solution that applies everywhere. So in Bihar, we are currently working alongside our Indian colleagues to evaluate the performance of existing systems and to develop Bihar-specific remediation guidance. I'd like to bring your attention to a final open access publication, which discusses important aspects of innovation and knowledge exchange, particularly with regard to arsenic in drinking water. So this article was published a couple of years ago in the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, Asia Pacific Tech Monitor. And this is an interesting article which is very relevant to developing decision support systems for arsenic remediation. Okay. So I'd like to summarize what I've covered so far today by bringing together a few key points regarding our ongoing groundwater quality research in Bihar. In terms of geochemistry, we found that inorganic contaminants such as arsenic and uranium can be present in some parts of Bihar, and that mobility is strongly controlled by geochemical conditions. Generally, areas that have higher arsenic have lower uranium, and the vice versa is true as well. And this distribution can be explained with the maps that were shown earlier. We've also found a variety of emerging organic contaminants in groundwater here, which is consistent with other studies. The emerging organic contaminants that we found at the highest concentration were lifestyle chemicals and in particular artificial sweeteners. So this shows that shallow groundwaters in Bihar and potentially elsewhere in India and South and Southeast Asia can be vulnerable to a variety of water quality impacts. In terms of remediation, there is often a gap between successful technologies and successful implementation. So an appropriate mitigation strategy must adequately consider the local context, including aspects of geochemical, socioeconomic, and regulatory conditions. Our group is currently working to develop robust decision support systems for selecting and managing remediation options, particularly in the context of arsenic, but we're also interested in expanding that out to other contaminants as well. And as always, our work is ongoing and there's much more research to be done in these areas. So this is just an overview of some of our recent activities, but this is certainly a very large area of research, and there's a lot of work yet to be done. So I'd like to fully acknowledge the funders, people, and institutions that have contributed to the work mentioned today. A lot of this was related to the Farganga project, which I mentioned at the beginning, which is supported by the UK Natural Environment Research Council and the Department of Science and Technology in India. And this is our sampling team that completed all the work in Bihar. And just lastly, the slide covers a disclaimer and conditions of use related to the content presented today. And for more information on any of the content, I refer you to the open access publications, which links are provided. And once more, I'd like to extend a very, very gracious thank you to the organizers for inviting me to contribute to this webinar series.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Manchanda ji.
Yes.
MANOCHA ji.
Sure, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Laura, for giving us such a valuable information. If I have to summarize for my audiences so that they can capture all the information, I will say that the groundwater contamination can be classified into two categories. One is the natural occurring, which is called geogenic, which is related to the conditions below the soil, and this goes from India to Southeast Asia, and you practically faces this arsenic problem in almost northeast part of India, Bihar, which flows down to Bangladesh and onward to Cambodia, Vietnam. So this is something which has to do with the geologic of the soil, and probably if you look at the possible solutions, you have to go for adsorption and precipitation techniques, which you have been doing, and practically most of the solutions either are you closed on the well if the contamination is beyond a treatable limit, or you provide a off-grid on-site solution. And the basic challenge comes is managing the local condition versus the technology, which you have rightly pointed out. So practically the approach is that you have to consider the local conditions in consideration while we devise a technological solution. So that was one type of contamination which was naturally occurring, and we also learned that arsenic comes along with iron and manganese. So if there's a contamination of arsenic, you will be having iron and manganese also along with the water. And if there's a presence of uranium, which is a radioactive metal, the generally arsenic and uranium are inverse to each other. If there's a high of arsenic, it will be low of uranium. But if there's arsenic, you can get a contamination of iron and manganese in the water. So any treatment technology has to take into account, one is the measurement of this contamination, and second is the treatment philosophy. So that is point is very well taken. And second contamination which you came out was the EOC, organic contamination, which is man-made pollution in the groundwater, because of change of lifestyles, because of pharmaceutical interface, because of agriculture interface, excessive use of fertilizers, or industrial contamination. So all these type of contamination exist more where there is a more of urban population, and less where there's a density of population is low. And when you have to treat those type of contamination, you need to again adopt a approach of treating this contamination based upon the contamination level. So if we have a right type of policy framework which relates to water and wastewater guidelines, probably some of this can be controlled by stricter monitoring of the waste generated from various streams. And I think the research which is going on in the field of artificial intelligence and the field of digital sensors, which can track down the culprit who has contaminated the water, will be useful in the times to come. But only thing is how soon this technologies can be commercially viable, we do not know. A lot of people are working on robotic science. Even University of Glasgow has developed some sort of robots who can measure the contamination on surface of water. But to what extent this can be commercialized, we do not know. And then you brought a point of methodology, whether you have to use this and you have to have a local approach. And maybe there comes a need of having a corporate social responsibility type of setups, or working with the local villages, working with the gram panchayats and all those things. So this is in nutshell what you have presented in your presentation. Very well presented and very well taken. So I have summarized it for my audiences, which if they are not from water treatment field, they may miss a lot of the points. So I thought I'll just do it in a summarization for you. And so this is from my side, Gulshanji, and to you in case you have some points or suggestions to be made. Over to you, Gulshan.
My deep gratitude and thanks to Dr. Laura Richards, and special thanks to Anil MANOCHA ji. As I'm a student from this subject, as I'm a humble student this evening, and I do not hold any kind of expertise or any kind of ingredients or a knowledge about it. So thereby, I would just like to convey my thanks to both of you. Thank you very much. And it was a great learning for me in particular. And today I educated especially about Bihar, because recently we had elections over there and a formulation of the new government, which will be now there for 5 years. So whatever you have put across, how further it is to be taken up, that Mr. Manocha can take up with the respective state government further what we can do over there. So with these words, our special thanks. Thanks for sparing your valuable time. Thanks for being with us. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise. And it's a great to learn. And every time, every Friday, I learn from Mr. Anil Manocha ji something new, some new dimension, because I come from a different field, which is there to basically waste the water, and that is hospitality industry, tourism industry, and of course, the services sector, airline industry. So every drop of water is very precious to all of us. It is very, very important for our living, for our survival, and the future, how it's going to be. So with these words, our special thanks to both of you. Thank you very much for this wonderful evening. Stay safe, stay fine, and let the world get back to the order once again.